Hi, I'm Caroline,
And I'm Megan,
and this is the Songwriter Diaries.
a podcast by songwriters for songwriters. Oh my gosh. The end
Hey,
of
guys.
season 10.
It's the end of 10. It almost
The
rhymes.
end of 10.
But it is a little bit different today because it is
Mhm.
just us.
Just us.
So if you're not a fan of our voices, then I would leave at this point. Because we will be talking a lot, but it's going to have a lot of great info. Because Meg came up with this idea to talk about creative burnout.
Ooh.
Ooh. Do you want me to share the definition of creative burnout?
I would love that.
I would love that. I'm
Okay.
reading this from Ness Labs.
Okay.
Sounds like a reliable source, but it is a .com, not a .org. So we'll see. It says creative burnout is a state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion around creative work. The symptoms can be hard to pinpoint, and the potential causes are many. Which I think that's pretty accurate to what we're talking about. And I was telling Meg before we started recording, I was watching a couple of YouTube videos about creative burnout. And it seems like the main difference in terms of just burnout, regular burnout, and creative burnout is just the work that you're burning out from. So
Yeah.
if it's creative work that you're doing, which can come in all shapes, sizes, forms, that's the work that you're burning out from. That makes it creative burnout, which is probably self-explanatory, but I didn't really understand what it was in the difference of it. So
Yeah.
but yeah, so Meg, what is your experience with creative burnout?
So my experience with creative burnout has been one that I feel like has lasted years. And has definitely had like highs and lows. I don't think I'm currently creatively burnt out. I think I'm just like burnt out on life
Mm-hmm.
in the sense of
Yeah.
like, wow, this thing just keeps on going.
Yeah.
And not necessarily in a bad way, but I definitely had a time in the last like 3 years, especially during the pandemic, where I feel like I was just kind of forcing myself to create and like forcing myself to sit down and write. And sometimes, in some cases that's like what you need to do, what you have to do. But for me, I feel as though that didn't help, and it kind of just made my creative burnout and burnout in general worse, to where it felt like creativeness became a job and I didn't want to show up to that job ever. And I feel like I'm still kind of rebounding from that, which is hilarious because I feel like just like in the comparative mindset, like comparing my experience to like someone that is making millions of dollars off of their music and whatnot, I probably like was doing like such small percentage of creative work compared to someone like that.
Yeah.
But for me, my creativity, like my music and that art, I don't want to make money from it necessarily. Like, it's cool if I do, but I've come to the place now where that is purely for me, and that is like what I like and what works for me. And and I still haven't written. I don't write a lot these days, but I am in creative projects and am playing music, and that's what's giving me joy creatively right now. And I like that. So
Yeah. And it's a privilege too that you have a full-time job. It's not like you need to make I hit my mic. It's not like you need to make money from your music. Yes, it would be great if you could, but I feel especially bad for the people who are creatively burnt out that are working so hard on their creative projects because that's the way they're making money. Like that's their sole source of income or their primary source of income. So you don't have as much room to be creatively burnt out.
Yeah.
And as much forgiveness in that sense, because you need to make something so that it makes money and that, you can live and have food on the
Yeah.
table and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that's always really difficult.
Yeah. So,
Not like I'm going
Caroline,
through that, but
what has your experience with creative burnout been?
I I also feel like the past 3 years, which is so strange to say because I moved to Nashville 3 years ago. Actually, it might be like the anniversary now of when I moved to
Oh, yeah,
Nashville.
it probably is.
Yeah. And I moved here because I wanted to get more into like the songwriting scene, but also had a job out here in the music industry. And I was hoping that that would kind of spur my creativity because after graduation, I was in a lull because I wasn't being forced to write for classes and I
Right.
wasn't surrounded by people, creative people, um, and any people because it was the pandemic. Um, so I didn't have that kind of motivation and that external influence on myself. So I was hoping the move to Nashville would kind of like, kick me in the ass a little bit and get back on the creative horse. But it really did kind of the opposite, I feel like, because I think that I just got so into the comparison of what I was doing in terms of I have so many friends who are working full-time jobs and then are also, I would say, full-time songwriters in the industry as well, on top of their full-time job. And I was seeing that and I was like, that's what I want to strive for, but I don't have that capacity. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that that has been kind of the biggest revelation over the last 3 years is that I value having a full-time job, at least right now when I'm, financially kind of floating and like figuring out what to do with my life. Like I like having that steady income
Mm-hmm.
and I don't have mentally or physically the capacity to do like a whole other job on top of that.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the comparison that at least I was dealing with, comparing myself, really got me down because I was like, I'm never going to be able to do this like these people. And if I'm not doing it like these people, then I just shouldn't do it because I should just give up on it. And I think I'm finally coming out of that. I'm starting to write a little bit more. I released a single back in March, but like,
Yeah.
yes. And like, that was exciting to finally release something again because it had been my album that I had recorded before moving to Nashville that I released in like 2021 was the last thing that I had released. But the comparison aspect is just so frustrating because you see all these people doing amazing things. It's like the girls on TikTok who get up at 5 a.m. and then they go to their Pilates and they get their iced coffee and then they work until like 7 and then they have like movie. Like they're doing all these things. And I'm just like, my mental health can't handle that. Like I do not have the same capacity and that is okay. And I think that's kind of been what I'm trying to teach myself of, you know, not feeling the need to do everything that I thought I wanted to do. Like that,
Mm-hmm.
what I thought I wanted is not in reality, one, something that I can manage in order to stay on top of my health, my mental health, and my sanity. And I can change that. Like, I don't have to be stuck in this thing that I thought I wanted just because I told people that I thought I wanted it. I don't know if that made any sense,
Yes. No,
but
that last bit was like such a nugget of wisdom. Like, that's actually something I feel like we've talked about this before that my therapist has said, like, just
mm,
because, like, my whole life, and I know this is you have had a very similar experience. Like, when you're a kid and you're like, and you kind of like choose a passion,
yeah.
and you like go your whole childhood, whole teenagehood into beginning adulthood with this passion. You're like, I'm going to follow it. And you have all these adults and family members and friends surrounding you going, yeah, 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 you're so
Mm,
good, like blah, blah, blah. And then you kind of reach adulthood and you're like, I don't know if I want this anymore. I feel
mm-hmm.
like for me, my whole world turned upside down and I was like, well,
Yeah.
I'm trash because
Yeah. No, I
I
feel
don't
that.
want this thing that I've wanted for 20
Mm,
years
Yeah, because you don't
anymore.
know the reality. When you're little, you don't know the
Yeah.
reality of being a touring musician. You don't know the reality of putting out songs like every
Mhm.
month or whatever it may
Mhm.
be. You don't know the financial reality and you don't know the livelihood reality
Mhm.
of that. Unless you
Mhm.
start that young, then you're thrown into that reality. But
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah. And it's just so interesting um how things change, and I totally love that we get to talk to people that have continued in that.
yeah,
Um we get to talk to them all the time, and I think that's so beautiful, and I love vicariously living through them. But I totally get what you're
yes.
saying about like those TikTok girlies that are like my
Yeah.
5 to 9 before my 9 to 5. I'm like, literally kill me. That sounds awful.
It sounds horrible. Yeah, I'm just like, I don't have the stamina. It's
Mm-mm.
just not
I
a
need
thing.
10 hours of sleep every night, or else
Yep.
I'm a cranky motherfucker. I
Yeah.
need 10 hours of
Yeah.
sleep. I need to do my skincare routine before bed. I need to
Mm-hmm.
brush my teeth. I need to
Yep.
cook and eat a delicious dinner, spend time with my partner, spend time with my fur baby, spend time with my friends, spend
Yeah.
time with myself, work 40 hours a week, and then I can do other things.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so much. And even like obviously we love the podcast. We've been doing it for so long. But even like I think we have a pretty decent handle on the workload. But even that on top of a full-time job is a lot some days. I'm just like, "Oh my God,
Yeah.
we're recording today. Like I'm excited, but also I just want to lay in bed,
Yeah.
and not do anything." So it is exhausting. And I admire people that can just go, go, go all the time.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I was listening to a YouTube video. I think it was from a TED Talk, and it was talking about creative burnout. And one of the things I mean, it's obvious, but one of the things I pulled from it was like, we are not machines, like, and we should not be expected to go like machines. Like, we need time to rest and recharge, and that is so important. And it is also recharging is even more important for those doing creative work because your mind needs that space to wander.
Mhm.
And in this TED Talk, which I'll have Meg link in the in the show notes, but she talks about how, it's our framework of output being so important is not conducive to creative work because you can't always be creative and productive at the same time. Like when you need to be productive and your productivity is being measured, you might not feel that creative that day. So it's like very much ebbs and flows, and you need that time off. You can't work like a 9 to 5 and be creative in all of that time.
Yeah.
So I thought it was very interesting. She says it a lot better than I do. Um, so I would listen to that because it was fascinating to hear like it is equally important to recharge and let your brain wander as it is to be creative and have that time.
Yes. I love to like not like I feel my partner Colin said this a while ago, but like music wasn't created like us as a species, humans did not create music to be sold,
Mm-hmm.
or
Yep.
to be made like to make a profit. We created music for like enrichment, for like for our souls, for our hearts
Mm-hmm.
and our minds. And people loved it so much that it became something that is to be bought and sold. And but what that wasn't its first intent or purpose.
Yeah.
And I think he said that and I was like, "Oh my god."
You're like, that
Slap
makes a
my
lot of
ass.
sense. Yeah. Yeah.
Like that it just like struck me so deep
Mm-hmm.
because I don't know, I just really resonate with that, and I think it's some like that kind of almost he said that to me like a couple months ago, and I feel like I have picked up my instrument more since then
Mm-hmm.
because I'm like, I'm not creating this for anybody else.
Yeah.
And I remember when we've both done episodes on here talking about our own music and like the other interviewing us with
Mm-hmm.
releases and stuff. And I remember my answer to our last question, why do you write songs, was, I write songs because it's a form of therapy for myself. And like, if someone else hears that and it's like therapeutic for them, like, woohoo. But if not, like, also still woohoo, because I wrote it for myself. And I think I got so far away from that, that I was just trying to produce rather than create. And now I'm trying to reframe and just create again and have that become, like, circle back into that form of therapy.
That is, I mean, you really just kind of put it in a nutshell of like the idea of production versus creativity. And why are you being creative? Is it just to create, or is it in order to be productive? And that's why it's so difficult to have the same expectations of creative jobs as non-creative jobs, because the output can't be the same, and the amount of work can't always be the same. It might be more, it might be less, because it depends on that individual, and it depends on their mind and their soul and how they're feeling in order to create what's needed in their position. So it's so hard. And I think it's also just more exhausting. Like, to me, working my 9 to 5, which is in the music industry, but it's not a creative job by any means. Working that, yes, it's exhausting, but to me, being creative takes way more energy than working, because I have an outline. I know what I'm doing. Like, I know what needs to be done. Whereas being creative, I might have that, but then it might not come. And then I get frustrated. And I think that my biggest thing with creative burnout, this is from another video that I'll have Meg link, about creative burnout, is how a lot of the pressure comes from, you don't feel like you're ever going to make anything as good as the last thing you made, or anything good ever again. And I definitely get that, because I'll sit down to write and I'm like, I need to write a full song right now. And the expectations, like, I'm just over ambitious. And that's an issue with creative burnout. If you set goals that are unattainable, then you're going to be disappointed in yourself, and you're going to judge yourself, and you're going to compare. So I'm trying to get better about just creating to create, and not to make something. Like, not necessarily have an end product. Like, maybe I'll just sit at my piano and babble for 30 minutes, but it will still have that healing effect that it would if I wrote a full song.
That is so true. So true. I feel like I do sit down with my guitar, or like when I feel like the inspiration, I'm like, oh my God, like, I have to stop everything right now, because this is like the moment where I'm going to write the next greatest song I've ever written. And then I sit down for 5 minutes and I'm like, the inspiration eventually fades, and I'm like, well, fuck me.
Yeah, exactly. I have such an expectation, and like, I think that's why I don't pick up my guitar or play my piano as much, is because I'm like, if I take the time to do this, then I need to get something from it in terms of a product. Whereas I could get something from it that's emotionally healing and just fun for me. Like, I love making music. Why am I so focused on the outcome of creating that music when I could just be focused on the act of creating itself? So,
wow, this is great stuff.
Yeah, good stuff. Yeah. So, on the topic of creative burnout, Meg and I are just burned out. I wouldn't even say for me. It's like, I feel like I'm getting out of the creative burnout a little bit. Also, one of my recommendations, which isn't said anywhere, a lot of the recommendations I saw for if you're experiencing creative burnout is to recharge. And I totally get that, but I also know that might not be doable for you in terms of recharging. And by recharging, I don't mean like sitting in front of your TV watching your favorite show with dinner. Like, that's just a break. Recharging, take a day, get off your devices, like, don't have anything planned, go on a walk, go on a hike, do something to just completely free your mind.
Mm-hmm.
And that will be super helpful according to all these sources. And when I've done it a couple of times, when I take my own advice, it's also helpful. But something that I've been doing recently, and it's going to sound crazy, you guys, it's going to sound crazy. I have been driving in silence.
Oh,
No
yeah.
music, no audiobooks, just driving, me in my head. And oh my gosh, the thoughts that I have in the car, both good and bad, but lyrical ideas. And it is so therapeutic to just sit in silence. And it is a little uncomfortable, especially if you're very used to having something playing like I am. But it is so nice. And you let your mind wander because there's nothing to do because you're not on your phone. You better not be on your phone. I say
Yeah.
that and I'm like, I've definitely been on my phone while driving, but I don't do it. Don't do it. I try my best not to. It's usually just for directions because I get lost. But don't go on your phone and just think and let your mind go where it needs to go. And it is incredible.
Oh, that is so funny that you say that because I have also been doing that more and more recently
We're connected.
because we are one amoeba.
We're one brain cell, honestly. We're just half a brain cell all the time, each of us. Oh my
Yeah, because
God.
I have an office now that I drive to like
Mhm.
4 out of 5 days a week. And in the morning I've just been not listening to music and I have the dogs in the back of the car and I'm just like and I end up just bopping to my own thoughts. Like I end up talking to the
Yeah.
dogs or talking to myself and like having a conversation in my head. Like that's so funny
Mhm.
that you say that. And I totally agree. It's so therapeutic, especially for me, like to start the day off with like no like
Mhm.
outside input is nice.
Yeah. Yeah, and I listen I want this podcast to like do a crossover with us. Emma Chamberlain's podcast
Oh,
is so good. And she did an episode where she talked a little bit about driving in silence and also just doing things in silence because we're constantly thrown media
mhm,
and like you say you're taking a break and letting your mind rest, but if you're listening to stuff, it's hard to let your mind just
mhm.
breathe. So I got the recommendation from her. I can't take full
Love.
credit. Also, I'm definitely not the first person to sit in a car in silence, as Meg has pointed out that they've been doing it also.
Well,
Um,
it's funny, my partner Colin does it all the time, just doesn't listen to anything.
of course.
Yeah. And
He's
so
a
I think I
guru.
got it from him. I know. What a little
Yeah.
Buddhist.
Um, but yeah, that was a side tangent, but we're burnt out. And we're gonna end season 10 here. Um, not a sad note, but kind of
A note of change.
a note of change and a note of rest. Because we're going to spend the rest of the year kind of getting our shit together.
Yeah.
Cleaning up the content that we have. You might see some changes regarding YouTube and Patreon. So follow us on socials and keep an eye out for that.
Yes.
Because we're trying to restructure and make sure that we can be the best we can be while also getting sleep.
Yes. And also be the best for all of you out there listening. We
Mm-hmm.
definitely want to hear from you and hear what you want to hear from us. We want to
Yeah.
hear from you what you want to hear from us.
Yeah.
So in the in in the comments below or on our socials on Instagram, we're at the Songwriter Diaries. DM us and say if you have like a songwriter that you want to hear from or an idea of a something you want to hear us talk about. Let us know. Reach out.
Yes. We also have an email,
Oh
the
yes,
songwriterdiaries.business@gmail.com.
at gmail.com.
Mm-hmm. So you can always email us.
Yeah, please do. Be our
Yes.
friend.
Be our friend. And we'll be back with season 11 come 2024. That's wild.
That, my friends, is actually insane because we started this podcast in what?
2019?
2019.
I think
So
we're coming up on the 5-year anniversary in November. It's amazing that this podcast has gone on this long solely because my capability with technology is still so minimal. Like, I don't understand what I'm doing right now.
Honestly, same. I'm YouTubing and Googling shit like every day.
2018. It was November 7th, 2018, that our podcast premiered, and it was only on YouTube. It wasn't on any DSPs or anything.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
So those episodes are still live if you want to listen to them. And I think they're also on Spotify now. If you want to go back through the archives during our break, you can do that.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun.
There's so many episodes.
Expect some changes in season 11. Hopefully good changes.
Yeah.
And if
maybe
they're bad, then
this.
we'll change back and it's fine.
Yeah. Fine. If everyone hates it, then we'll go back.
Like if you end up boycotting the podcast, we'll change. We will change for you. We
and
do this for you. I'm just kidding. We mainly do it for us, but
yeah,
but we love doing it for the audience as well.
Yes.
Well, so, any last words, Meg?
My last words are yes. This fall, going into holiday season, maybe plan a weekend where you completely unplug. Maybe, if you can afford it, you book a little Airbnb in a mountain area near you. You go on some hikes. If that is not feasible, maybe you just unplug, tell all your friends and family you're going to be home. You're going to be working in your yard, like getting it fixed up for winter. Maybe clean out your gutters because actually you should really do that before snowfall. So go spend the weekend, unplug, clean your gutters, write a song, sit down with yourself in silence. And we'll see you in 2024. Those are my last words. Caroline, do you have any?
I think you summed it up. I was also going to say clean your gutters. That was exactly what I was thinking, is clean out your gutters. And clean out your mental gutters.
Yes.
While you're cleaning out your actual gutters. This has
we'll
gone
see you
off
in
the
the new
rails.
year.
Yes. Bye.
Bye.